Okay, so what I'm going to show you, there's a couple different methods of controlling, using one attribute to control other attributes. The first one that I'm going to show you is actually the more complicated one. It's called SetDrivenKeys, and it's from the animation menu set. So what I need to do, let's do my squash and stretch first. So I need to select my squash handle. I need to select the squash on the input section, and then I need to hold down my space bar and go to Animate, Set Driven Key, Set. Okay, so there, now in the driven portion of this Set Driven Key window, there's a squash 1. If I select that, then I have this factor attribute that we were using to animate the squash and stretch of our ball. Okay, so that now I need to select the control that has my custom attribute on it, and then I'll click Load Driver. Now I need to go through and I need to select in the driver the squash and stretch attribute name and the factor attribute name. And so I can go through here and I'll now before I press key, I have to exaggerate this. Before I press key, you want to make sure that the attribute for the squash and stretch is set to where you want it to be for the factor. So to make sure, if I select the ball anim, right now I want my squash and stretch is set to 0. That means that, to me, 0 means it's not affecting the mesh at all. And then if I go to my squash and I see the factor is also set to 0, that's good. So now that I've verified that, I will select the squash and stretch attribute and the factor attribute, and I'll say key. And then you'll see in the squash, the factor value now turned red. That means it has animation on it. Now I want to go back to my ball anim, and I want to increase my stretch value all the way to 10. Then I'm going to go to the select squash 1 again. I'm going to set my factor, and I'm going to squash the ball. Okay, so now the problem is I still have my cluster activated, so I need to set this to 0 so that my cluster wasn't affecting the ball. Then I can see a more realistic deformation of what's going on here. So 4.1 is definitely way too much, and I want this to be a compress. So let's say that's the widest I ever want my ball to get. Okay, so -0.8. And now with both these attributes still selected, I can say key. Now if I go back to my ball anim and I select this squash and stretch attribute, I can drive the squash and stretch deformer with just this attribute. So with that done, I could go over here and hide my squash and stretch handle, because I don't need to see that anymore in my viewport, because it's being controlled elsewhere now. Okay, now let's do the bend control real quick. So I come over here and I select bend handle, select bend in the input section, and I go to the set driven key window, say load driven, and then I have this bend and this curvature value that we want to control. So on my ball anim, I need to select the bend attribute that I created and the curvature attribute on the bend deformer, and I'm going to set it to 0 because it should be let's verify, make sure. Okay, so it's bend is set to 0. That's what I want. Now you'll notice that when I go back and select here, Maya by default automatically goes back to the attributes you've already set keys on. So you want to double check this selection over here, because you can burger things up really fast by not double checking that. So I've got my bend selected and bend 1 curvature selected. Key. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my ball anim, and I'm going to set bend to -10, and I'm going to set my curvature to about as far as I think I can bear. -50 looks like a good number. It's good to use nice round numbers when you're doing this, because these values can be edited from the graph editor if you need to alter them later. Okay, so key that there. Now you'll see my bend is actually working. Now I need to do the positive side of that attribute. So I'll choose a +50 for my curvature and press key. Now we got my bend is also controlling things. So I can squash it, bend it. Okay. Now I need to control my cluster. So I'm going to select my cluster in my hypergraph, and I need the actual transform node of the cluster that's what I need to be controlling. So I'll click load driven, and this time the attributes that I'm controlling are I'm going to control the translate Y. But to verify, pancake is set to 0, and the cluster handle 1, translate Y is set to 0. That's good. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but you just want to verify that it is actually what you want it to be. Okay, and then I want to move this down. Oh wait, I need to key it first. Okay, so now I want to pancake it, and I can move this down so it's flat. I'm going into my side view so I can get it as flat as possible, and I'll say key. Now my pancake attribute is not working. I did something wrong. Okay, so let's go back and see what I did wrong. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the no, it appears that it is, but if we go to my hypergraph, it appears that my bend is selected, but it's not. It's just that my ball anim control, which has everything housed underneath it, is selected, so it appears to be selected. So to make that not look so, I'll select the bend handle and go ahead and hide it, since we have a control for it that we've verified is working. Oh, was it? Yes. You're a good inspector. So what happened is I accidentally didn't check my selection, and so I keyed the translate through my bend attribute. So I need to undo until I've undone that. And I'll know it's undone when the cluster 1 Y attribute is not read anymore. Okay, now I'm back to ground 0 for that step, and I have the correct attribute selected this time, and my cluster handle, translate Y, I'm going to key it. Now I'm on the right track. I'm going to change my pancake attribute to 10, go to my cluster handle, move it down so it's perfectly flat.